Welcome, dear viewers. Good afternoon. Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI. I'm your host, Parthy Kandaval. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. Our sincere wishes on this special day. On the first part of the show, we will have Meena Serendib, a daughter, filmmaker, actress, dancer, and poet. Meena has recently written and produced a short film, 3 Puffs of Gold. She has starred in the horror film The Apparition, Fatakra, and has had roles in NCIS Los Angeles, Bones, and CSI New York. We will speak to Meena about her career and take a look at some of her work as an artist. Welcome, Meena.
Thank you, Parthy.
Thank you for coming on the show. You're in town visiting from LA, from Hollywood. So it's a pleasure to have you on, and especially somebody from our diaspora who's done very well in a variety of fields, in artistic fields. So I think to give our viewers a sense of your body of work, we'll play a reel with some of your features. So we can play the clip.
You know you have something on your face, right? I can help you. It's right here. I can get it.
No, that's my bindi. It's decorative.
Oh, right, yeah. It's really pretty.
Let's address your anger.
Do people have toilets where you're from?
Where I'm from? In Orange County? Yes, we have toilets.
Because you smell like chicken.
Excuse me?
No. Like delicious chicken.
Okay, I would like to go back to talking about you.
Is this a mosque? Oh my god, this is a mosque!
No, it's a tree. Why don't we start with an om?
What?
No, not om. Just om. This is not in the least bit difficult. Okay, this isn't working.
So that was a great reel of showing some of your dramatic acting as well as your comedic roles. Meena, so I think before we get into discussion on your work that we've seen in the reel, but what prompted you, what motivated you to get into the artistic fields of dancing, acting, poetry?
I feel like I was always a performer, right? Like, and I blame my upfront for that, whether he likes it or not. You know, he was always kind of the life of the party and a ham. Right. So that has always been something that's been a part of me. And when I was a senior in high school, I participated in a drama event, and it was like a huge competition, and the end result of that was that I got to perform in front of 1,600 people. And the piece that I performed at that time was an eyewitness account from Black July. Okay. And it was such a thrill and rush being able to present our story and just share with the audience in that way. That this kind of light bulb went on around how valuable storytelling is.
It's very true.
So after that, I ended up going to UCLA.
And what did you study there?
Initially, I was going to do French and international relations, right? I was going to be in the UN or something. But then I switched into
another form of theater.
Yeah. So then I graduated with a degree in theater and a minor in French.
And I understand soon after or during your college years, you had the opportunity to be in a Pepsi commercial. So you can quickly tell us about that.
Basically, Pepsi was casting for 4 South Asian dancers who were already in a company together. I danced with a lovely bunch of girls, the Thal Dance Collective, down in Los Angeles.
And you're fully Bharatanatyam trained?
I am, yes, but our style is fusion. You know, one girl is Kuchipudi, another is Mohiniyattam, Kathak, whatever. So Pepsi found us, and we auditioned, and we booked it, and it was great.
And then soon after that, how did you transition from a dancer to an actress? Or
well, I mean, I think I consider myself, I am a dancer, but professionally speaking, I am an actress. That's what that's what my main focus is. And pretty much basically, like, after graduation, I just did the regular Hollywood hustle. I was waiting tables for a long time, and then I was lucky enough to land a really great commercial agent, and then found my manager, and together we just started working together, and it's been really great since then.
And what was your first role? What was your, I guess, in terms of big break or?
I mean, big break. I mean, like my first
it's relative,
television thing
debut
was on CSI New York.
CSI New York, a very popular show. And is it on NBC?
I think it's on, I want to say CBS.
CBS, right?
Yeah.
Go on.
And they were actually casting for a Sri Lankan mother.
Okay.
And I sneakily, I got, a hold of the casting notice, whatever, and I called them. Because at the time I didn't have any representation.
Right.
So I called them and I just pitched myself really, really hard. And they ended up bringing me in and I auditioned and booked in. That was great.
On that note, you're in a field where there are a lot of people. It's very competitive, and it's a tough call sometimes to how to choose people. What values did you find the most instrumental to achieve the success you've achieved so far? And you talked about the hustle, right?
Yeah.
And what values for somebody to break into the industry, get these beginning roles? What's needed?
I think number one, don't think of it as a competition. I've got a lot of other friends, and a lot of times when I go to auditions, you see the same faces over and over again, right? So don't think of it. I never think of it as a competition. If one of my girlfriends books a role that I didn't get, because the only competition I have is myself. I just have to be the best that I can be, and then everything I have coming to me will come. So that's the number one thing. And then the number two is really think of it as a job and as a craft. Like, work hard. I go to class, I study, I do as much as I can to stay professional. Because somebody once said being an artist is the only job you can never get fired from, right? I'll never lose. Nobody will ever tell me
something for life.
You're out the door.
Yeah,
it's
you're
something for
you're
life.
An artist for life.
So work hard.
Yeah. As we noticed in the reel, it was a combination of roles that are considered ethnic based on your skin color, presumably, and it's also a very mainstream role as in the office position. So how have you found how Hollywood and casting directors and producers have looked upon you as an ethnic woman?
I mean, it's changing so much. I have a lot of friends who are booking non-ethnic roles whatsoever, right? And like Hollywood likes their diversity to whatever degrees, so it's nice having different colors and stuff on faces. But in terms of the ethnic question, I have never had an issue going in for ethnic roles. And I think that's because I so strongly identify with my ethnicity that for me it's not really an issue. Like, I love playing those characters and bringing dignity and life to them. So I have never felt strangled by that pigeonhole or anything like that.
Okay, that's interesting to note that that accepting the ethnic woman identity characters is instrumental.
If that's who you are.
If
that's who you are.
Recently, you've written and executive produced a short film, 3 Puffs of Gold. But just before we go into that, I understand you also starred in a 19-minute short film movie called Fatakra, which got an award from the Academy, and the Academy referring to the Oscars for student, as a student award. Can you tell us about that film?
It's a beautiful. I mean, I think everybody.
We saw a clip of that in the.
It actually wasn't in.
Okay,
I wish I could have because, but I have it on a different. But I think everybody on that production really appreciated the magic that was in it. And Soham Mehta, who is the director of that film, is just a beautiful, beautiful filmmaker and storyteller. So it's basically about an Indian family that is separated between India and the US, as so many immigrant families are separated in the beginning. The strain that put on their family relationship and their eventual reconciliation and how they came back together as a unit.
And when was this film made?
We shot it in 2009, summer.
Okay.
And then we were honored and we got the Student Academy Award just this past year in 2011.
And that was your first short film?
That was like the first kind of,
film. And now this film that you're in, 3 Puffs of Gold, you wrote and produced. Can you tell us about the theme of the film and the whole experience of writing and producing?
Okay, the story it's never explicitly addressed or mentioned. But it's about a woman who is a survivor of sexual assault. And it was a date rape. So she hasn't told anyone, and she runs into him at a friend's dinner party. And so then all of a sudden her silence starts to come out of her in all of these dark and magical ways. And kind of the themes that I was exploring at the time when I wrote it is the effect that silence has on a survivor of any kind of trauma, right? Sometimes we choose to maintain silence. Sometimes we stay quiet because we don't feel safe coming out and talking about it. And there's two elements to that dynamic. Number one is that when you choose to stay silent, you are re-inflicting the trauma on yourself because you don't give your community the opportunity to be there and support you. If you don't tell anyone, how is anyone supposed to be able to help you through something that's really scary? And the other angle is that it really is a community's responsibility when you have a survivor of something. There are some times when you can't speak up for yourself, when it just gets really scary to have to be the one on the front line. And in those instances, it's the responsibility of our friends and family members to come out and speak up for us.
And as an artist, you know, you have the choice to do what are considered, you know, the glitzy, glamorous, fluffy roles, but you chose to do and address a serious topic that is present not only in our community, but other community, all communities.
Yeah.
Why was that meaningful? Why did you choose to do that?
I think that, I mean, it's not to say that I don't have fun doing other, you know what I mean? I have other projects that are not, that are lighthearted and fun, that have nothing to do.
Like the serious role, which not everyone will watch or cater to.
I guess just because that's important to me. It's personal and it's important to me. Yeah.
And also included in Three Puffs of Gold, you had another Tamil individual who's in the acting field, who starred in as well. Perhaps you could tell a little bit of Sankrish?
Sankrish Bala.
Yeah.
So he's a good friend of mine. We actually knew each other from back in the day growing up, you know, in the Bay Area. And then we went to UCLA together. And I cast him because I love him and I thought he would be perfect for the role. And it is nice when you're doing your own production, you get to cast your friends, and we had a really diverse cast, which on some level was conscious and on some level was just because they were the people we liked.
Also, dear viewers, please feel free to call in and ask any questions to Meena, or if you have any comments, please call us in at 416-623-8100. Meena, okay, so we've discussed your production and your acting. I think perhaps where some of us in the diaspora, or at least in Toronto, came to know of you is through a spoken word poetry recital that, you know, went pretty viral in our diaspora community, and, you know, brought you to a lot of positive response. You'd written a poem entitled, a spoken word poem titled An Open Love Letter to the Tamil Man. Can you tell us about that? What prompted the writing of it and the recital of it?
So I used to write quite frequently and then I stopped. Love Letter was the first piece that I wrote after a very, very long spell of not writing. And I have to give credit where credit is due. My good friend Ahilan Sivaganesan had performed one of his spoken word poems at our local... Ahilan was on the show just a few weeks ago, so he performed a piece at our Kalevra. And I was backstage while he was performing, and all of a sudden I was just like inspired to want to write again. So I gave myself a deadline. I had a week to write the piece. And it was just kind of, it was, that piece for me is still very sweet and magic, because it was definitely one of those pieces where it just came out. Yeah.
And on that topic, and viewers, so those of you who haven't seen it, I highly urge you and encourage you to search Meena Serendib Love Letter on YouTube, and you can see the 5-minute poem. But also following that, you had another successful poem called Singhala Spring. And you know, it's an obvious reference to what's happened in the Middle East, Arab Spring, but you've entitled Singhala Spring. Can you tell us about the need for that poem and what it was, what kind of call it was for?
That came out of a series of conversations. That came out of a series of conversations, but I was talking to a good friend of mine, Gayatri, who is Sinhalese, and really just exploring the different dynamics. Because I personally, there's so much of me that is very Tamil, and there's so much of me that is Sri Lankan. You know what I mean? My family, we have mixed family members, and I identify very strongly on so many different levels. And it basically just came out of the feeling that I just wanted them to stand up for us and to be able to really, really share and appreciate the community that we do have.
And perhaps like the pain that we've gone through and the need for them to understand.
Yeah, and just the need to like really, really fully join in community and to appreciate the quality of the shared history that we have, because there is so much and on so many different, you know.
And to tie in all your pursuits, whether it's poetry, acting, writing, dancing, have there been times that you've doubted your abilities, doubted yourself, and how have you overcome it? How have you continued in this, in a field which is not traditional to our community, right? Our generation.
All the time the doubt comes up and like, should I really be doing this and what else, you know, whatever. I think number one, it helps to surround yourself with really good people. And when I say good people, I mean people who are better actors, better directors, better producers, so that I'm constantly just like learning from them and taking gems from them, you know. And the other thing is just really remembering what I'm in it for. There are times when I, especially in the past couple of years, really wondered whether I shouldn't have become a doctor or gone the more traditional field, because there's a big part of me that does want to be of physical, practical service. And what I am appreciating more and more is just the value of art. It's a different form of healing. It's a different form of bringing communities together, expression and inspiration. And that's important too.
Okay, and as a final message to, you know, the younger kids in our generation who are thinking of pursuing these artistic endeavors, what message do you have for them?
One of my favorite quotes is, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So live in your passion. When you live in your passion, it is something that inspires everybody else and keeps you driving, keeps you going forward. So that would be, you know, really honor and own that and be willing to learn and to let things change. Passions change, but if you live in your passion, I think you're going to be all right.
Thank you, Meena.
Thank you, Parthi.
It's time for a break, but we'll have you back on for the last segment on Mother's Day. Dear viewers, it's time for a short break. Please join us as we return to Crossroads. Welcome back, dear viewers. On our show for our second segment, we have Sinthujan Varatharajah from the London School of Economics. He presented yesterday at the University of Toronto's annual Tamil Studies Conference. His paper was a study of caste in the Ula Tamil diaspora. Sinthujan is completing his master's in race, ethnicity, and post-colonial studies at LSE. So Sinthujan, you know, your presentation was very well received yesterday at the Tamil Studies Conference, with the majority of the questions going to you. And it was an interesting topic that you've chosen, which, you know, proved to be somewhat controversial, was the study of caste in our community, our Ulam Tamil diaspora. What prompted you to study this? Why did you feel it was important?
I thought it was important because caste used to be historically always a very major component of our societal interactions, and it has always remained silent. And even though there were subtle and overt forms of caste discrimination, caste performances that were part of Tamil culture, but the moment that Tamils started to migrate into the diaspora, the dialogue and discourse on caste was entirely silenced. Silenced due to the fact that we were facing situations of being refugees out of the country, as well as having the conflict back home and struggling on different ends and means in the outside as well as in the inside of the country.
And what were some of the findings? I understand you had created an online survey which was anonymous, which allows people to say their true opinions and thoughts on caste. You had about 708 participants. What were a few of the major findings from your survey?
Well, the major findings of the survey were that because of the fact that only a particular kind of population was accessing the survey, there was already a bias in the results itself. So caste in itself seemed to be less important because of the fact that most of the people who participated in the survey were of a particular caste heritage, which was an upper caste Velare caste heritage. Almost 78 or I think 86% of the 86 actually percent of the participants were Velare. That means there is a particular caste privilege and also caste obliviousness towards the issues that are still intrinsic to our society, because caste pride is pretty much silenced and is only exerted from a certain part of society, whereas caste privilege also influences caste blindness as well as the exercise of caste discrimination towards those who are from the lower caste strata.
Okay. And there are different categories. You asked your participants to answer how caste affects their relationships. Yeah. What were those categories, and which was the most significant?
Well, I separated between friends, acquaintances, colleagues, as well as girlfriend, boyfriend, as well as marital partner. Yeah. And you could see that the amount of the consciousness towards caste differences and caste identities rose the closer you actually approached the status of marriage. So participants took were more aware of caste differences and caste identities once you actually approach the issue of marriage. Whereas when it comes to friendships or simple cooperations in the working world, caste was no more as much of a relevant factor as in the instance of marriage and relationships.
And the majority of the participants, what age group were they in?
They were pretty much 80% of them were between 34 or below. So it was a very, very young population that participated in the survey.
Okay. What are some of the other important, from your own analysis, to what extent is caste configured in our generation's relationships with other people of our background?
It seems to be that caste is very invisible and it's only exercised and articulated in very selective instances. So it's not particularly a daily part of our life. But it keeps on emerging and re-emerging in particular instances of our lives. For instance, in the aspect of marriage, it seems to be a significant part, but many people do not acknowledge it or are scared of acknowledging that, whether it's their own caste consciousness and caste identity that influences the decision, or whether it's actually the parents who influences these decisions. Yeah.
Okay. Were there any interesting, I know you had space for people to comment, to give comments. What were some of the more interesting comments people included in their response?
Especially in relation to caste discrimination, there were a lot of examples that were rather unknown. For instance, a lot of people were talking about how caste difference also influences marriage in itself, the premarital stage, as well as the postmarital stage, in the sense that the conflicts that arise between families simply on the fact that one partner in marriage is of a different caste heritage. So there's been a lot of exclusion, a lot of discrimination, a lot of defamation going on. And
were those first generation or second?
Yeah, they were first generation.
First generation.
Yeah. And a lot of separations are also happening, and divorces are happening on the basis of caste difference. So people who, at least according to the results, people who believed to actually be able to overcome caste differences were taught different by society as well as by their own family in the way how they treated them. And different examples of caste discrimination were, for instance, that when it comes to the restaurant business in Canada, there were a couple of examples that people were avoiding to go to particular restaurants and catering services simply by the fact that they actually employ people of so-called low-caste origin.
Was there a breakdown between, or differences of significance between participants who responded from Europe, say Germany, Swiss, those European countries, compared to Canada, the US, Australia, England?
There were the Anglo-Saxon and Anglophone speaking countries were very dominant in the survey participation. So we only had approximately 50 participants from continental Europe, which excludes Britain. And it was a factor of the way the survey was spread, as well as the way the survey was accepted. And I think there was also a lack of mobilization that was part of the societal construction in continental Europe, which is less developed as, for instance, the British Tamil community or the Canadian Tamil community or the American Tamil community.
And something we were talking earlier offline was, in certain parts of Europe, say Germany, Swiss, Denmark, a lot of our community, our Tamil community, are in a way not connected to the mainstream, like how Tamils are in England, in US, and Canada, where we're part of the fabric within the mainstream society. Whereas in these European countries, they're almost segregated or left to themselves, and thus retain more of the caste identity or the Tamil caste identity from back home. Why do you think that is a result of?
Well, first of all, I think that the majority of people who live in Anglophone countries, like in Canada or the UK, are very much unaware of the fact that policies of integration and multiculturalism are very different. So the social construction as well as the level of social mobility are not as given as they are, for instance, in the UK or in Canada, which are relatively larger.
And by social mobility, their ability to get into the working classes and more...
the opportunities, basically.
The opportunities,
And
is less in those European countries.
They're less, and also the forms of racism and discrimination that you face are much larger. So there's a particular sense of claiming to an identity that is being contested and as well as challenged, but if by fact of being unaccepted and unwelcomed in the particular country they live in. So old traditions seem to retain and to be reproduced much larger and to a greater extent than, for instance, in countries where the level of integration and social mobility is much better and more given.
And as a result, what do you feel that those of us here in Canada, we're starting to shed our allegiance to caste, our connection to caste? Or is it still, where would you say it is on the spectrum?
I wouldn't say that necessarily. I mean, the participation was the greatest in Canada, but I think it was also the fact that particular Canadian organizations were endorsing the survey, and it was addressing and circulating amongst Canadian Tamils much larger than in any other Tamil society. But I do think, considering the fact that a lot of the examples of caste discrimination that were described by participants, that caste discrimination is still part of Canadian Tamil society. And it seems to be less visible than in countries like France or Germany. But it's still part of our society.
Was there any indication there is growing support or identification with shedding our caste labels, our caste markers?
Considering the fact that 70%, almost 73% of the participants actually knew their own caste origin, I'm doubting it. But at the same time, some participants were very conscious about not stating their caste identity because they refused to identify themselves in terms of caste.
Dear viewers, if you have any questions or comments to Sinthujan on this very sensitive topic of caste, please call in. We'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. Our number is on the screen, 416-623-8100. Please call in. Sinthujan, also, while you're conducting this survey, I understand there were some challenges and some criticisms from within our own community against this survey. What were those challenges?
There were particular forces of resistance that I faced and obstacles, which were coming from different sectors of society, and they had different motivations, because some of them were nationalists, Tamil nationalists, who were unaccepting towards the idea of identifying ourselves in caste identities, and also to talk about caste and bring the subject back to the social consciousness. And I think their criticism really roots in the idea that silencing caste as an issue will also eradicate caste from the social landscape.
But so they're claiming that if we don't talk about it, we'll get rid of it.
And at the same time, there was a lot of rejection and condemnation towards the study, and people were trying to either question my integrity or the purpose of the study. And there was a lot of paranoia as well as fear towards the idea that the Sri Lankan government might use it to pretty much apart our community and try to use caste differences in order to intrude our Tamil community and disunify us.
Did you respond to those criticisms, or did you?
No.
Or did you feel it just there was no point?
There was no point in responding to these. I mean, I archived them all, and I'm trying to write some paper about it and include it into my evaluation of the survey, because it's part of the survey itself and the reaction that is faced by the community. So, and a lot of the people who were actually discouraging from participation were also calling for halts of the survey as well as boycotts of the survey. So it was not just passive resistance, but also active resistance. And I think it's very much embellic for the kind of state of mind our society has, and how much we're actually open to the idea of talking about internal issues that we face.
And so is this forming your thesis for your master's?
No, it's not.
Okay,
no.
it was just a study.
Yeah.
Have you given thought to your thesis at the master's level?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to write my thesis basically about Dalit nationalism and Black nationalism in America.
Sorry, which?
Dalit nationalism. Dalit nationalism.
Dalit.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And Black nationalism in America. So it's a comparative approach of how the civil rights movement in America influenced Dalit nationalism in India. And with a specific focus on Black Panther and Dalit Panthers.
Okay, all right. On that, connection with the African American civil rights movement, a few commentators have made some analogies to our situation in Sri Lanka in terms of a non-violent democratic movement for Tamil rights. Do you see any connections with what the African American community went through in the 1960s for civil rights and our community situation now in 2012?
I do see overlaps and I do see similarities, but I do think that comparing both situations does not really suit the situation itself. I also think that the Sri Lankan state in itself is very different to the American state at that point of time. So the forces that were used by the Sri Lankan state and continue to be used to silence Tamil political opinions do need some different forms of resistance from the Tamil community back home.
Okay. What is the nature of the work you're looking to do? Perhaps to give us an idea, you're a growing academic within our community in Europe. What are your thoughts on the line of work that you like to do?
In general? Or?
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about doing a PhD soon. So I'm thinking about, because my focus is not really what is happening in Sri Lanka, but rather what is happening in transition. So what is happening in diaspora. So my analysis is rather how the community is developing, and not just our community, but diaspora communities in itself, and look at them in a comparative approach. So what I've really realized as being part of the community is that the focus has always been, and for a very long time, been dominant by looking back at what is happening in Sri Lanka and how the political situation is developing and the social situation. But little focus is being given to what is happening with us here in diaspora. Yeah, and I think that's something which is very, very under-researched and needs to be given much more account.
On that note, as a final question, what advice do you have to the younger kids in our generation that are looking at studying the social sciences, the humanities, and they may face some resistance from their parents to study more technical subjects such as engineering, life science, and maths, business. What advice do you have for them who are looking to study this line of?
I think they should not be discouraged by the kind of reactions they face by society and by families, because I think Tamil society has very, very much been dominated by people who go into natural science or these typical kind of classified Tamil educational pathways. And as a community as a whole, we lack of people who are in the social science and who approach things in a different level.
That's right.
So I do think that the community itself needs to be more open towards the idea of accepting people who try to think differently, to approach our community differently, and to also give them the space to articulate. And people who do face these obstacles should not look basically discouraged by what is happening, but what is happening around them, what people think about their ideas of studies, but should think about people who actually have made their way, like Sivanandan, who have made their way in a very unconfirmed and non-normative way to approach what is happening to our people. So,
thank you, Sinthujan. That's the time we have for this segment. Dear viewers, please join us after the break for our third segment, where we'll discuss Mother's Day with a young mother and Sinthujan and Meena as well. Please join us. A mother is the truest friend we have. When trials, heavy and sudden, fall upon us, when adversity takes the place of prosperity, when friends who rejoice with us in our sunshine but desert us, when trouble thickens around us, still will she cling to us and endeavor by her kind precepts and counsels to dissipate the clouds of darkness and cause peace to return to our hearts. This is what is said of motherhood and mothers. On our show today, we have a good friend of mine, Sujany Krishnalingam, who's both a daughter, granddaughter, mother, a new mother, and also an engineer, which is probably secondary, to join us on our show and talk to us about motherhood and Mother's Day. And Sinthujan and Meena will also be joining us. So Sujany, thank you for coming on this show. What has been, I guess, the strongest emotion or thought after you became a mother, or maybe during your pregnancy?
Well, first of all, it's a rewarding experience for sure. And it's a drastic change in your life, and your perspective in life totally changes. That's one thing. And also the challenges that you have to face and you have to prioritize is a secondary, but it's also very important, and you need to have a very supportive group, friends and family members to overcome and be the best mother you could be. But it's a rewarding experience, that's all I could say.
And one question that immediately came to my mind when we thought of this topic, obviously today is Mother's Day, is how did your relationship with your own mother, or if it did it change after you became a mother? And just to give some context, you're one child, a daughter, is 2 years old,
Right.
who actually, viewers, today is Sujany's daughter's birthday on Mother's Day and your husband's birthday.
Yep.
So, but how did becoming a mother change your own relationship with your mother?
Actually, after becoming a mother, you realize how hard it is to raise a kid and how much sacrifices they put through. Like, I mean, when you're young, you don't understand what they do, what kind of sacrifice they made to make you who you are. And now that I'm doing that myself, I learn to appreciate, and the love grows. I mean, being a mother and the motherly and the daughter relationship always is there, but you just learn to appreciate, and then it just changes your perspective totally.
You became stronger, and
it's
closer.
much stronger, and then you learn to appreciate your parents a lot more.
After becoming a parent.
For sure.
Sinthujan and Meena, what, Sujany spoke of the significance and the importance of that affection and the hard work and perseverance a mother shows. And, you spoke of your artistic career earlier. How has your mother supported you?
My Amma is extremely supportive. I mean, my Amma from day one has always told me that she just wants me to be happy. And she has fully supported anything I've done,
And what's been like a connection you have with your mother, like in terms of, is there a moment where you always remember the proximity and the love between you and your mother?
I mean, something that I always do, which I know is in memory of my Amma, anytime I'm going anywhere, whether it's for a function or just out, the very last thing I will do is I will put my pottu on. And I get a lot of questions in the States about why I wear it and what does it mean, whatever. And I often suspect that people expect some kind of like culturally related answer. But the truth is, my Amma always wore a pottu. And so when I put a pottu on, I feel really pretty. So that's why, that's the reason why I wear it.
And Sinthujan, you're in a field of the social sciences that we just spoke of, and your mother is a Tamil poet, and you're both in the humanities field. And is there a connection that you derive some of your identity and values from your mother?
I think our mom, like my mother, she was very encouragetive of what we're doing, and she was also very expressive that we should really articulate our feelings and be open about them, and never conform to what society expects of us, but really do what we want to do and be happy with what we do. So our mom always was very encouraging. She was very supportive of what we're doing and of what I am doing, which does not really fit the average Tamil studies or Tamil kind of education pathway. So it's good to have a mother like mine who is really supportive of what I'm doing.
I know personally, I connect with my mother. Was a talented public speaker back home, and that I feel like has benefited me. We've had that connection. Sujany, how has the role of having a baby and her being, hopefully one day becoming a mother herself, how has it changed your own perspective on life? So aside from the family, being a mother, how do you look at the world now, after being 2 years as a mother now?
I look at the world as if we need to think collectively and look at it as a group, rather than before we used to always think about ourselves. How am I gonna become this or that? But now, just being a mother alone, it helped me think of it as okay, how am I gonna pursue my life as a family? And then you look elsewhere, and then you're more giving rather than thinking about yourself all the time. That totally changed my perspective in life. And there's a lot of sacrifice that you need to make. That's another which I've done a lot.
Is that a struggle when you have to sacrifice some of your own
dreams
and ambition?
It is as a young mother. It is, because we've grown up here. We're career oriented. I'm a professional, and so being said that, you want to pursue, and I'm a very competitive person. So having said that, if you're in a corporate environment and you want to move up your corporate ladder and so forth, and you need to put a lot of time and you need to prove yourself, and then also you want to be the best mother you could be. So how do you balance that? That's a challenge that I have. But for me, my daughter comes first. So that being said, you put a lot of energy, and you want to prove yourself in both ways, and it takes a lot of energy sometimes.
And that sacrifice is tempered with the joy of motherhood, right? And what's the biggest joy? Is it the small things? Is it the virtue of being a mother is a joy, or
simple things you learn to enjoy? For instance, today my daughter, her Mother's Day's gift was a drawing, just like a scribble, and it's this is a snowman, and this is a heart, and this is that, and you're wow, that for me was art. I'm an artist myself, but for me that was the best thing ever, and I spent nearly 2 hours just looking at that, enjoying that. It's just a very rewarding.
Sujany, as you're a second generation Tamil Canadian mother, how do you think your role will be different from the role your mother was or occupied?
For me, how I look at it is, our last generations to come, women were a little bit more submissive. They were dependent on men and so forth. And for myself, my husband, thankfully, he was very supportive. We're equal, or he even looks about, he's very supportive. So having said that, one of the reasons why I want to advance in my career is to set an example for my daughter, so she could move up, and I want her to be independent, be who she wants to be, and overcome all the obstacles. So I want to be the person that she could look up to and say, my mother made it this far, and I want to just overcome and be a role model. Be a role model, pretty much. So. I think that would be the next generation for sure. Just
Meena, you'd like to be a mother, from what I understand, one day. What are your hopes and ideas about motherhood, and what you would like your daughter or son to be, and what do you think that connection will be like?
Honestly, I hope that I yell at them as good as my parents yelled at me. I feel like that's a really bright part of our culture.
Of being a Tamil mother?
I want to yell that. Really.
I think everyone can identify with that.
I think that's the biggest thing. And then just sharing all of the Tamil stuff that I want to make Vende Colombo as good as my amma makes. I want to be able to make puttu for them. And it's interesting what Sujany said about ambition, etc. Because I think that's one of the challenges that our generation faces, especially when you're in entrepreneurship or any kind of real career path, is how do you know what I mean? Like we're older when we finally are ready to settle down and have children. There are sacrifices on all sides of the table.
Yeah, that's a good point. And our generation is having children, you know, at least 3 to 4 years later than our parents' generation had us. Sinthujan, as I understand, you would, you know, like to be married and have a child one day. What do you think, as you know, as a young bachelor, if I can reveal, what are your dreams of being the father of children, but also being the husband of a mother, of a wife? What do you think it'll be like?
Well, I'm sure it will be inspiring. I can't say how it is now, but I'm sure it will be inspiring. But I also think it's important, like, to keep on, like, holding on to some sort of our heritage and be able to, in the context of being in a diaspora, be able to actually share what we have, where we came from, what our parents have given us, and also share some of the heritage that has come from this country, basically from where I've grown up, Germany, or where you've grown up in Canada, and mingle it all together and be able to transcend it to our children and give them the best of both worlds.
And our heritage, and our culture, and our background, and the struggle as well. As a Tamil man, what do you think our expectations are, and of our wives, of Tamil women, and how will it change with our generation?
Well, I guess since our society has always been very paternalistic and very patriarchal as well, I think there needs to be a much more open and equal approach towards women, and domestically as well as in society as a whole. And I think that our society is also very misogynist, yeah, there you go. So I do think that we need to acknowledge the kind of inequalities that are part of our society within our
cinema.
Yeah, within our individual relations as well as in our collective relationships. And in order to identify these, we need to start afterwards to eradicate them, whether at home or outside. So I think for Tamil man, the ladder is really high to really be better than who our society has made us, or our society has been intrinsic to.
Yeah, very good point. And Sujany, as our final note, what message do you have to, you know, expecting mothers or fellow young mothers about motherhood on this special day?
Just be ready emotionally, physically, and mentally. That's important. But moreover, get a supportive group. Because there's a lot of cultural cultural things that you need to overcome or you need to accept as a family. Like, I mean, when being a young mother, giving birth and going through certain phases in life, I've overcame some cultural things that I said, no, that's not good, and then I'm going to adapt something from the Canadian culture and this and that. So know what you want, like, you know, have a goal as to how you want to pursue as a mother, and then just convince your family members and so forth, and go from there. But moreover, just be positive. Positive.
Thank you, Sujany. Thank you, Meena, Sujany, Sinthujan, for coming on the show. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. Once again, a very happy Mother's Day to everyone. Our love to all the mothers who day after day toil for the welfare and well-being of their children. We only hope that we all realize the love and hard work you put in for us. A special Mother's Day greeting goes to my Amma, who's always supported me and shown great love, as well as to my mommy and Amma. Also, don't forget today at 6 p.m., Raga Sangamam Carnatic Vocal Talent Competition Finale will be held at the Agincourt Collegiate. The show will start promptly at 6 p.m. Audience participation is needed for voting for your favorite singer, so do please join us and encourage these young talents. Thank you for watching Crossroads with Parthy Kandaval. See you in 2 weeks. Have a good week.